Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Ron Finley. Welcome to the Applying Awareness Podcast. I'm your host, Adam French. For those of you who didn't know, the name was the Applied Awareness Podcast, but apparently someone already came up with that. So I had to change it to the Applying Awareness Podcast, but the message is still the same. Cultivate awareness of self and the world around us, and apply the awareness we cultivate to make our lives more purposeful and more fulfilling. It's really about examining the cause and effect we see in our own internal stories, as well as the larger collective story of our society, and using our knowledge and awareness of these cause and effects and factors at play to become better people, citizens, and forces for positive good. In this episode 10, I've gotten to 10 episodes. Let's go. Thank you for everybody who's been listening and who's been interacting with my stuff on social media. So in episode 10, community gardening kicks ass. I talked with my father and Salt Lake City community garden mafia don, Jim French, about how he got started with community gardening, the fascinating and beneficial social dynamics that emerge from the permaculture lifestyle, and a little bit about permaculture before we hop in to the interview, because it's an important concept to know. Permaculture is the design of our systems, of our energy systems, of our social systems, of our food production systems, any system you can think of that is conducive to our well-being. It's the design of those systems so they are embedded in nature, and so they function as a piece of nature instead of disrupting our natural ecosystems as they are currently. So that's what permaculture is as a principle. We also talk about how to get started with your own community gardens. So this is going to be a really cool interview. It's me and my dad. Obviously, we're really close, and he has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share with those who want to know more about community gardening or thinking about getting started. So I hope you enjoy this episode, because I definitely enjoyed recording it. All right, let's get started. Okay, I am here with the community garden extraordinaire, Green Thumb, and my father, Jim French. How you doing?
Great, Adam.
Awesome. So you got into community gardening how long ago?
Oh, it was after we moved to Salt Lake,
Okay,
which was about 12 years ago.
that's a long time ago.
And it happened very soon, actually, after. It wasn't so much initially community gardening as
Just gardening.
community.
Oh, just community. Okay, it started with the community, not the gardening.
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
We started to make friends, actually. As you recall, we moved from the Washington, D.C. area, the Maryland suburbs, and it was very difficult to connect with people there. I'm hopeful that it's easier now, but we just had a hard time over quite a number of years, and came
in D.C., right?
in D.C., yeah, in Maryland actually, and came to Salt Lake, and it was sort of like instant connection.
And who were the first people that got you, kind of accepted you and welcomed you into the community here? And were they gardeners?
This woman who's now the director of Wasatch Community Gardens, Ashley Patterson.
Okay.
And I met with Ashley very early on. I talked to people, and a lot of folks said, you want to talk to Ashley to see what's going on and who to meet with. And connect with, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And she owned a store. I believe it was the Green Building Center. And of course, when the big box stores got on board with all those green things,
Yeah.
they had to go out of business. But she landed at the Wasatch Community Gardens, and I talked to her, and she told me a lot of names, and that was really where it got going.
You just reached out to people. You were like, "Hey, let's connect. Let's meet up." And they were like, "Okay, we're over at the garden. You can visit us there."
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yes, something like that.
Interesting. So what was what was the moment where you got started and you were like, "Hey, I really want to do this community gardening thing"? Did it come over time, or was there a moment where you went to the garden and you were like, "Wow, this is beautiful"? Or, how did that happen?
Well, we had what was called the garden group.
Mm.
And this was a number of years that we were a group, and we would get together once a month. The point that it happened was when I realized that there were a lot of people around here that were like-minded with myself around growing food, around being in community, and just that realization after the experience in the DC area, it was like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is different. And this is different in a much better way.
Yeah.
But the garden group is all it was I think there was an email to 60 people or so, or maybe more. And once a month, we would get together at someone's house, do a potluck, and if they had a project that they wanted to do, either starting a garden or improving on something, we would plan it during that potluck.
Nice.
And we would plan it to do it, say, within a week and a half. So we would have the potlucks usually on Friday, and sometimes we would plan it for the next day.
Yeah.
Of course, there was some pre-planning done before that.
But,
But usually it would be maybe in another week. And we did what came to be called as permaculture blitzes, involving mega permaculture and a lot of people, 20-some people coming together.
Wow.
For 3 or 4 hours, and a lot of materials and doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. That's funny. I mean, the way you describe that process, it sounds to me like a design agency, like a community source design agency, where the potluck's your discovery meeting, where you discover the problems a client has, and then you plan it out with the client and with the team that you're going to tackle it with, and then you blitz it. That's a lot like the design process, and permaculture is a design process, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that process, the permaculture process, as in like when you're designing a garden, what are the thoughts and what goes into that?
Well, people with their permaculture design certificate, which I do not have.
Okay.
So I'm not really qualified to talk a lot about that. But they do have a design process, and it's each one is different. It's like, it depends.
Yeah, on the context.
On the context.
Well, that's part of the process, right?
It is part of the process with any type of design. So, there are 12 permaculture principles.
Okay.
And the first one is observe and interact. And then there's obtain a yield. There's 10 others.
Yeah.
Which I don't have memorized.
You don't have memorized. That's
you
okay.
could look up and see permaculture design principles. But they all make sense. You use the materials that you have on hand when at all possible.
Yeah.
You look at what you have, and you work with that.
Instead of bringing external resources.
As much as possible. You're going to have to bring some external resources in, especially if you don't have a garden. But you want to catch and hold water. That's huge here in the West, in Salt Lake especially, where we only get 13 inches of moisture a year.
Yeah, not much.
Not much. So the design process really is different for each individual location. And that's what makes it so cool.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things that you can use, a lot of tools in the toolkit.
Yeah.
But you don't have to, and many times you don't want to pull them all out just because they're in that toolkit. They may not be appropriate at all.
Yeah. So it's definitely very contrasting with our current developmental mindset that we have as a society around development. And I was seeing things like this earlier where it's all quantitative. It's all get as big as possible, and that means with technology get as advanced as possible. And there's no
as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And there's no consideration of making the most of what resources you have. And
permaculture flies in the face of that
Yeah.
philosophy, definitely. Now, it's not to say that things can't happen fairly quickly, because if you give the plants a situation where they just can't do anything but grow,
Yeah.
they're going to do it.
Yeah.
You've been over there, but we have a permaculture type food forest here in Salt Lake, and it's 1/8 of an acre, very small, but in 4 years
It's a lot of stuff.
is a lot of stuff, and it's starting to produce really well.
Yeah.
Peach trees that started out as small twigs, literally 2 feet tall,
Wow.
3 feet tall, now are 10 feet tall, 10 feet in diameter, and producing 80 large peaches in their 4th year.
Yeah.
So something's working.
Yeah. It's probably all the knowledge and hard work that's been put into that garden. I know, like I always, you're always at the garden, where's Dad? Always at the garden. And you always come back with the dirt on your hands, and I've been there, and there's a lot of planning, execution, and daily maintenance that goes into getting a yield of all those peaches, and I think that's one thing that we are trying to currently bypass with technology. We're trying to bypass all that effort, and we could maybe augment the labor that needs to be done, but I don't think we could replace it with technology.
And there certainly are. You see the strangest things. When I was on Facebook,
Yeah.
robots for the garden.
Yeah.
They go in and they do the weeding for you. I mean, come on.
That's the whole point of gardening. You want to be in the dirt, right?
Well, you want to, and that's one thing. If you're there, you see things.
Mm-hmm.
You see things that may need attention. Like you may see that where a peach borer has drilled into the bottom of the peach tree trunk. And if you're not there weeding around the base of the tree or pushing things away from the trunk, you're not going to see that. So it really helps to be personally involved. And where there was a lot of work initially with this 1/8 of an acre that we have, it's becoming less and less as the system gets established. Trellis systems get built, the berms get built, and in our case, we discovered that a couple of the berms or hugelkulturs weren't doing the job. They a mound in the desert in many places is not necessarily the best thing.
Yeah.
Because you just don't have as much water as you need to fully saturate that mound. So we turned some of those, we flattened them out or made them a little bit concave to attract a little more water in there, and that way we get a little more space and certainly more moisture. In there.
So the amount of labor you've had to do is decreased. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
There's an inverse relationship between time invested and work left to do on the land because you create your own self-sustaining ecosystem. And one thing I've noticed about our current state of agriculture is you need to do more work as you bring more fertilizer in. You need to apply more next year, and you need to grow more crops because the price keeps going down because everyone's producing more. And it's almost, it's a real contrast between a positively regenerating cycle and a negatively degenerating cycle. What have you seen examples of labor one year or one season turning into independently driven growth by the garden the next season?
Well, one thing that I knew, I think, from the beginning, and this garden is 4 miles away from our house, so
Yeah.
it's not right around the corner. It's a 20-minute bike ride. So
Yeah.
not too bad, but you do have to make some effort to get there.
It's a
and
trip,
get back.
yeah.
It's a little trip. And so we're finding that, at least I am, that I'm much less inclined to plant annuals there. Annuals being plants that you have to plant every year.
Yeah.
They grow and they die.
Yeah.
And we're replacing that space with more perennial plants that come back
Stay there.
every year,
You don't have to replant.
like fruit trees,
Yeah.
bushes, berry bushes, asparagus, a lot of grapes,
Tasty stuff.
tasty stuff. Yeah.
Real tasty stuff.
Things that you don't necessarily see in the supermarket, like currants. With asparagus, a lot of what you see comes from a long ways away. With these perennials, and the problem is, Adam, is that they spread. It's not a problem. They
It's a
spread.
great thing.
It's a great thing,
Yeah, is
and
that
so
they spread.
so they spread, and so this garden, and I encourage everyone to think like this, to become a resource for other people that want to add to their garden or get a garden started. So we have raspberries growing in the garden that came from a neighbor's garden over there because there were just too many. They
Yeah.
were just spreading. Raspberries do that. And so eventually I see the time when our raspberries will spread beyond where we want them to be. So we'll dig them up and they'll go to somebody else. The strawberries spread and go to someone else.
Wow.
The comfrey, dynamic nutrient accumulator,
Yeah.
that spreads and it goes somewhere. If people get in this mindset that it's not mine,
Yeah.
that it's okay to let some of it go,
Yeah.
and you're always going to have it, then, and the old saying that things always come back.
Yeah. Yeah. The private property obsession, there's a point where it's useful, and it's useful to keep track of who has what, so, people aren't stealing from each other and everything's fair. But once you obsess over it to the point where you're trying to do things like control nature and put limits on something that is limitlessly complex and abundant, that's where you start to get problems, and that's what we're trying to do. And that's a really cool model of you start a community garden somewhere and it becomes this force of change and source of abundance through time as you invest your time into it. It makes this garden a source of abundance for the community and whoever else around you wants to garden. And that's a very powerful thing to say, oh yeah, I just gave these strawberries and Joe started growing my excess strawberries, and then Joe has excess strawberries, and now all of a sudden it's going around and around, and all of a sudden everyone has enough.
There's more strawberries. And that goes for blackberries, it goes for raspberries and elderberries. About 98% of the 60 plants that are growing over it's called Playground East, came from somewhere else.
They're all immigrants.
We're orphan plants, yeah, immigrants. And they've, most of them have adapted very well. And the ones that don't, that's okay.
Yeah.
You just put something in there and see if that does better.
Yeah. The fail, replace it. Don't be afraid of failure. And obviously, it's easier to not be afraid of failure when your life doesn't depend on the crops growing well.
Correct. Yes.
But I mean, at the end of the day, that just speaks to do farming right. You have to invest a lot of time up front, and that's something in this world that doesn't merge well with our current financial ecosystems and incentives. So
That's a good point. Everything that we grow is gravy. There's right next to Playground East. There's a garden, Keep It Real Vegetables.
Yeah.
And they have Tyler and Holiday have gardens all over the city. They have like 12 of them.
That's awesome.
Yes, and so that's how they make their living.
Yeah.
So they do things. Of course, it's a great comparison.
Yeah.
You have this some would say mess, sprawling stuff.
Yeah.
And then right next to it, you have row gardening, very neat, but they've gone to no-till. They're putting a lot of loads of horse manure on there, leaves, composted leaves. So they're making that soil shine too.
Yeah. And when the soil shines, your plants shine. A lot of people don't understand that, like, a leaf of lettuce grown in soil that has horse manure, leaves, maybe some comfrey, and by just a quick tangent, by a dynamic nutrient accumulator. Was that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. So it pulls. It has this really deep root that goes way below the surface soil, and it taps into nutrients below the soil, and it brings those up into the plant, which then you can chop down, and it decomposes into the soil, therefore releasing the minerals and nutrients that the plants need. That's what a dynamic nutrient accumulator does.
That's exactly what it does. And dandelions are those also.
Dandelions. But anyways, like, soil that has those nutrients and that diversity of input are going to produce food that's reflects that nutritiousness in the soil. So like lettuce with fertilizer that's just nitrogen fertilizer, it's not going to have a lot of different nutrients where you can draw health from. But lettuce that comes from soil in one of your gardens would have a lot more nutrients, even if it's the same straight of lettuce, right?
And I'd venture to say that it tastes better too.
Because you're tasting the nutrients.
Right.
We're evolved to say, ooh, tasty nutrients. Those are good for us,
Yeah. It's also a lot cheaper.
Because you don't have to buy fertilizer?
You don't have to buy fertilizer.
How expensive is fertilizer on the scale that you're growing?
I have no idea.
They never even checked. Well, it's free. It's
checked.
free.
It's free, right?
With a little bit of labor.
So the garden group, that's where it all got started.
Yeah.
And then I discovered this Salt Lake permaculture group. And they used to be called the Permaculture Guardians. And then they changed it to the Salt Lake Permaculture Guild.
Yeah.
Which
it's a medieval
makes
terms.
Perfect sense. So the guild is a lot and traditionally around a tree. You plant a guild around a tree, which is basically support systems for.
Is that a type of garden, or?
It's just putting plants like comfrey, parsley, oregano, garlic, anything in the allium family, garlic chives, around fruit trees, and they provide, the tree provides shade for them, dappled shade for them, and they, with their root systems, provide nutrients for the trees. And comfrey, of course, with the chop and drop.
Yeah.
That is also helping the trees out. They also.
And that's what that system is called, a guild.
Yeah, a guild.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. That is perfect.
Yeah. So, and they also provide a way to keep water intact because you got mulch around there, and where you have mulch and when you have plants, you don't have a lot of water evaporation.
Mm. And that's how in Phoenix there's a fruit tree garden. That's how a guy built a fruit tree garden in Phoenix. He just put down a lot of mulch until he trapped enough water to have these trees grow.
Mm-hmm. And he did it really well. I think I saw that YouTube video. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks doing great things in the Phoenix area, just basically by putting 18 inches to 2 feet of wood chips down, and then the soil develops under there too.
Mm. So yeah, I mean that's a big that's a good point for everyone who's like, oh, I'm not in the climate where I can grow things. No, that's a bad excuse. You can grow if you're not like in a frozen tundra, and if you're not in, well, I mean Phoenix is the most desert ecosystem you can get, and this guy has like 30 plus fruit trees in his yard. So there are always ways to hack and manipulate the ecosystem around you and harness the natural processes found in an ecosystem to get your plants to work, right?
Yeah,
because
create your own microclimate.
Yeah, and you have these like greenhouses made out of like PVC and tarps, right? That get like really warm over the winter. Is that how warm do they get in like 20, 30 degree weather?
Oh, if it's has access to the sun, it certainly get up in the 70s or 80s inside.
And it stays there.
Well, it drops at night, of course.
Yeah.
But people put in, what are they called? Like big barrels painted black with water in them. So they accumulate the heat.
Gotcha.
And put it out at nighttime. And really, you just need to keep it above 30, 35. Most things will be fine. Even with just a simple hoop house.
Yeah.
Just with plastic thrown over some hoops outside. I just put the plastic in front, and that's pretty amazing. All you need is a little bit of sun hitting it, and it really heats up inside.
Wow. That's crazy. So you have like 3 or 4 projects that you've been really heavily involved with around the city, including the project that is our front yard. And our fridge is always full of the stuff you bring in from there. It's really cool. What was the process of, kind of making those grow just slowly over time and adding stuff over time? How did you decide? Did you have a strategy from the get-go, or did you kind of just make stuff up as you went along?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Because like I say, I never took my permaculture design certificate.
Oh.
So but there was a lot of observing, and in the when it first started, you were about 8 years old, and we needed the front yard for a little football field.
Yeah, I remember that.
So we couldn't. It was done in stages.
Yeah.
It was done, and that's one thing that I encourage people to really consider doing. Start out small. Start out in little chunks, and then expand. And it's really good to have a plan, but if you don't have a fancy design drawn out, don't sweat it.
Yeah.
Think about what you like to eat, and there's all kinds of information on the internet. There's just a shout out to Sean at Edible Acres. He has been a great source of knowledge. He's in upstate New York.
Okay.
And he's dealing with all kinds of things up there now. 3-inch rainstorms are not unusual, but he's catching and holding that water and putting out YouTube videos that are just fabulous. They're not too long, but they give good basic information. and you can never feel like you have stopped learning. I feel like you can always be learning something.
Yeah, which is the fun part.
It is the fun part to make new discoveries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did not have a plan for the front yard, but things over time, the football became less and less of a thing.
Yep.
So I
became less and less of a rampaging psychopath.
Right. I kept asking permission to do this, and the answers around the dinner table were, yeah, go ahead, no problem. So this year we have a lot of pink lady apples that are very tasty.
Delicious, yeah.
And we're eating them. We'll be eating them probably into January, hopefully.
You harvested when?
We harvested in end of October. Usually we do a little bit sooner, but there was
3-4 months worth of apples in our front yard.
Yep.
For a family. You probably give some away too, right?
A few. We traded the pink ladies.
Nice.
And a Bartlett pear tree and the Red Haven peach. Red Haven peach trees, especially if you get a small one, which this is, you look out there and it's really small, but we, a couple years, have gotten over 500 peaches off that tree. We'll have those through June probably. And another thing, don't feel like you have to do it all, because there are
always people.
There's a lot of people that have, over the years, that have planted a lot of trees and a lot of berry bushes, and they just don't want to deal with them. So there's organizations in Salt Lake. It's the Green Urban Lunchbox, and they organize all these picking in people's yards. People say, hey, I don't want to deal with this tree. I don't want to pick it. I don't want to prune it. I don't want to pick up all the mess that drops from it.
Yeah.
So they go in and pick, and the pickers get a third. The homeowner can get a third, and the third goes to food banks and such. Or there's always the old knock on the door.
Yeah.
Knock on the door, meet somebody new, say, hey, are you going to pick that apple tree? Or do you mind if I pick the apples? And most of the time people will be thrilled, because they get tired of picking them up and putting them in the garbage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there are a lot of different ways, and in the future, I'm going to be playing around with different ideas for how to leverage all the people, growing stuff in our cities, so we can have this food not be wasted, and make sure people get value out of that value that's being created, because people don't look at food as valuable, really. They look at it as a commodity that can always be replaced, and
you just go to the store and get more.
Yeah.
If what you have in the refrigerator rots and it is no good anymore. There's statistics on how much food is wasted, but it's pretty bad.
They're disgusting.
So we want to have less of that.
Yeah.
And even if it comes down to just giving things away, if you have too much, just put it out on the sidewalk, near the sidewalk, free.
Yeah, with a little note.
This is good stuff, and it'll go away. Yeah. People will appreciate it.
There probably are some places where there's food to eat and people are still starving, everywhere. But we need to figure out how to capture the value from this wasted food and reuse it.
Yeah, Ron Finley he's started doing that in, Southeast Los Angeles. He has a great TED Talk where he just blows them away. I love, one of his great mantras is planting your own food is like growing your own money. But there are a lot of people in need, and there's certainly a lot of food out there.
What are some organizations in Salt Lake? You mentioned the Wasatch Community Garden Organization earlier, right? What are they doing? Because I know they're doing something that involves helping out people in need with gardening initiatives.
Yeah, that's what Ashley Patterson is the director of now. They do a lot of classes. They have, I think they're up to something like 18 community gardens where people can have a little plot and they can come and grow their stuff. Wasatch Community Gardens provides the water. Just people have to come and grow stuff. They
Like
do
maker spaces.
kind of like that. Yeah, they do them all over the city.
They buy the land for it?
No, usually the land is just donated, and it's sometimes in a spot that's just not used.
Yeah.
It's going to be developed sometime,
Yeah.
but it's not yet. So the city lets there be a garden there. That can go away, but in the meantime, they can grow.
Might as
food.
well use it. Yeah. And these gardens, they're very good for city, like the design and the fabric of our cities. They provide places for people to hang out. They provide community spaces for people to meet. And
They
like
do.
you can just walk over and start doing work, and there's going to be someone who's kind of knows what to do, and you can just walk in and join, right?
There'll be other people you need to sign up.
Oh, okay.
They've recently gotten a bunch of new garden spaces.
Awesome.
So it's a lot more accessible. Chances are there's going to be people that have been doing this for a long time there. And,
Yeah.
so you can learn from them. They have a lot of great initiatives. There's something which our garden group got going. We sort of handed it off to Wasatch Community Gardens, which is a garden share thing, where basically if people have garden space but they don't want to garden it, they can invite people in to garden there. And some of those people may be people in apartment buildings, or just live in a plot of land that has a ton of trees and just all there is shade. So there's that too. I think it's called Garden Share. I'm not sure what they call it, but on the website you can find it. So they do a lot of things. Green Urban Lunchbox is another one.
Yeah.
That they have gardens all over the place. They have a program where geared toward elderly people that really may not have the energy or the inclination to garden. So someone comes in and gets it set up, and they can have a garden on their property. And then the person maintains it, and they have apprenticeships for people that want to learn how to garden to come in and work that plot. So Green Urban Lunchbox, and they also do the fruit share, where you can go during the summer and sign up to go pick whatever, whatever's in season. Apricots, apples, grapes, a few peaches, pears, lots of stuff. The Salt Lake Permaculture Guild has a really great growing garden at the Krishna temple. That's where the guild meets every Monday night for potluck. So that's another great resource for somebody that wants to get their hands dirty and get involved and learn, but doesn't have a place to do it. And there's, I'm sure, others, they're just not coming to mind right now.
Yeah. So what are the main benefits you've experienced through this journey and your continued involvement with community garden, and what could it offer to other people thinking of doing it?
Well, I've made a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Made a lot of really good friends. And I think that's the big thing. Because friends sometimes are not that easy to come by.
It's true.
And this is a very natural way of doing it.
Yeah. Literally natural.
Really natural. So friendship and nutrition. Knowledge. Everybody knows something a little bit different.
Yeah, it's true.
And they approach it from a little bit different way. Um, and those are the big things.
And I bet there are a lot of life skills, like organizing and coordinating these efforts. I mean, I know you're not looking for new work, but if you did put it on your resume, I mean, there are probably a lot of things that you could say like, hey, this made me a better person because X, Y, Z, and you just listed off a few things of that. Like, these are very useful experiences that aren't just like, oh, we were diddling around in the garden and picking strawberries. Like, this is real, like, work. This is a lot of thought put into this.
It's organization. It really is, and you don't think about it when it's happening because it just kind of comes natural, and there's not a lot of selling involved.
Yeah.
Say, hey, let's go pick some apples.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to get people together to do that, or let's go help somebody get a garden started.
Yeah.
And that's just not something that's a short-term thing. That's a long-term investment.
So one thing that I'm really passionate about, and that is kind of my life goal, is to take movements like these and make them like make a future where the culmination of these movements and the concerted willpower that's being put into them by so many individuals, so they can get to be like the mainstream methods of food production, you know, like instead of having all of that be in these niches and the farmers markets and being, you know, maybe fed to certain schools or certain people, to have everyone be eating their food. When they buy an apple from the store, they're not even thinking about it, but this apple comes from, you know, someone 2 blocks away who's operating a community garden. What do you like? I know you're not a business masters, but like don't have a business masters. But what do you think is the first step towards that? I mean, on an individual level.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is the Utah Resilience Map. Having a resource that could list all the things like you're talking about, or as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
Like community-supported agriculture, gardens, community gardens, or just a couple of the things. And online resources. So it's the Utah Resilience Map, and something like that, it lets you see in a snapshot just what there are: maker spaces, intentional living communities, community-supported agriculture, a lot of those, and community food. A resource like that where people can go to and say, okay, these are all the community food organizations near me. Just putting it out there and letting people know what's available.
Yeah.
It's not something that you normally see altogether.
Yeah.
It's here, it's there, it's hard to find. You know, we've done a real good job of coordinating a lot of things, but community food and organizations
marketing
that build resilience, right?
Marketing.
Farmers are terrible at that sort of thing.
Yeah, they tend to be the internet and marketing, the most important tools to scale in this era. So I mean that's why I have this passion of building this platform where people can discover these things. And at the end of the day, you have to get the farmers to sign up for it. So I mean, I guess that's the hard part, getting people enthusiastic about it and getting farmers that willing to scale, or getting them the resources to scale. And you know, it's difficult, but you just gotta hustle, I guess.
Yeah, being a farmer is really, really hard work. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I admire everyone that does it at every level.
So to kind of wrap up really informational and interesting conversation, what advice do you want to give to people who have thought about starting their own garden? They're like, oh yeah, growing stuff would be cool, but think, well, I don't know where to start, or this is too much work, or I can never do that, I'm too busy. What advice do you have to give them in terms of next steps?
Well, first of all, start small. Start thinking small. Don't think that you have to rip up your whole yard right off the bat.
Yeah.
But search out your local resources. Not everybody has a Wasatch Community Gardens organization or Green Urban Lunchbox, but I bet in most cities there's something.
Yeah.
Search out a local farmer, somebody like Tyler and Holiday. Their name is escaping me, but
Yeah.
Keep It Real Vegetables.
Okay.
Somebody gardening on a small scale like that. Maybe you can volunteer 3 or 4 hours a week and maybe get a free meal and maybe a share of the food.
Yeah.
And plus you'll learn something. But be open to things like that. And if you don't have the time to volunteer, just reaching out and taking a little tour. Find the people that have garden in your neighborhood. Go knock on their door.
Yeah.
Say, hey, I really like what you're doing here.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started? Maybe come look at my place and see if there's something that you might recommend. So that's and of course there's the internet with a lot of people doing great YouTube videos. But think small, think about what you like to eat, and then just start growing that.
Yeah, and start growing your network. Start reaching out. I think that was the main takeaway I got from that answer is reach out to people who have done it before and ask them what you should do, because we're in Salt Lake City. We can't tell you because I don't know where everyone listening to this is, and it's all contextual based on what does your lawn look like, what does your ecosystem look like. That's part of the beauty of it. It's customized to the land, so we can grow these wonderfully nutritious things that can start to grow without our help after a few years.
Yeah, and some things grow a lot better in some places than others.
Yeah. There you go. So to sum it up, it's easier than you think, it's quicker than you think to get started with community gardening. And if you're good at marketing and the internet and you want to get involved, reach out to me or Jim or any gardeners and say, hey, I want to help you with your online efforts, because that's just something that community gardening needs to scale. And so it's a common way to grow fruit.
A couple of books, just real quick.
Yeah.
Gaia's Garden and The Permaculture City by Toby Hemingway, Hemenway, and The Wild Wisdom of Weeds by Katrina Blair.
Okay.
Wonderful resources.
Okay. To get started.
Yeah, to get started.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'll link those in the show notes. So check it out. Hopefully you have your own garden. Tweet it at me. My Twitter is in the show notes as well. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your enthusiasm for this, because there's a lot of both.
Thanks, Adam. This was a lot of fun.
That wraps it up for this episode of the Applying Awareness podcast. I hope you're leaving more aware than when the episode started. To reach out, you can email me at appliedawareness.pod@gmail.com, or you can just check out my LinkedIn and search up Adam French in LinkedIn, and you can connect with me there. If you want to see more content from me, I post a lot of it. I post every day, guys, so hopefully there's a lot of awareness and positivity for you to get outside of the show, and that can be found on Twitter or Facebook or Medium. Just search up Applying Awareness Podcast and you'll be taken right to my page. And if you enjoyed the episode today and what I am doing, the biggest thing you can do to support me and the podcast is to rate and review it and write a little review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. So I'll provide links in the show notes. If you could click on that and take 1.5 minutes out of your day, not even 2 minutes, to write a review, I would really, really appreciate you. I appreciate you now, but I would appreciate you even more if that's possible if you wrote a review. And for the next episode, it's going to be an Entrepreneur Hour interview with my friend and sales master, Brendan Allen Barrett. And we're going to be talking about his experience with sales, what got him into the field, how he pushed through adversity in his own life by using grit and determination. And we're also going to talk about social awareness and how that plays a huge part into selling yourself in life, how to sell your product, selling whatever, how to use awareness to sell everything. So it's a really valuable episode. Brendan is super, super on top of his stuff. So it's going to be a really good one. I'll see you next time.